Reading battle reports in city building strategy games can be a challenging task for many new players. It can take a while before an adequate understanding is developed that allows players to read through a report and pick apart what really matters. For example, many new players struggle with determining who has won a battle. In this video, I'm going to focus on how players should compare the results of a battle report. This first report involves a fairly large battle involving 27 players. Despite having an overwhelming number of members, the Med Alliance seems to have taken a massive defeat in this particular battle. Let's examine why. The first indicator provided in the report is the power loss on both sides. Power loss is calculated by the power of lost and wounded troops of each team. This can often be a poor indicator of which side came out ahead, as wounded troops are easily recovered while losses are not. In this case, however, the power loss is consistent with the battle results. Med lost approximately 7 million power, while WNB lost less than half that amount. A much better indicator of the outcome of the battle comes in the next section of the report, where we see the number of units and other statistics. In this section, you can see the breakdown between kills, losses, wounded, and survivors. Kills refers to how many of the enemy's troops this group of players managed to kill or wound. The losses refers to how many of that team's units were killed in combat, and these units cannot be recovered after the battle. The wounded number tells us how many of that team's units were wounded in combat. Unlike losses, wounded can actually be recovered in the hospital, costing the players only a few resources and healing speed-ups. Survivors are the amount of troops that were undamaged in battle. Now, considering what we know about these different numbers, we can start to identify how the battle actually went. Most of what a player should care about is found in the losses and wounded numbers. The ultimate purpose of a battle is to set the enemy players back as much as possible. It's nice to wound units as it forces players to have to spend some resources and speed-ups to recover their units, but really wounding units is not nearly as impactful as giving the enemy losses. It costs significantly more to train units in terms of both resources and speed-ups as it does to just heal the same amount of wounded troops. In fact, since wounded are fairly easy to deal with, many players will simply make a comparison between the number of losses. In truth, the actual determinant is the collective amount of resources and speed-ups needed to recover, and it would be really nice to have that represented in the logs in some fashion. Since it's not, let's do a quick comparison between the cost to heal and the cost to train. To heal a single Tier 9 infantry unit, it would cost 39 food, 8 wood, 4 stone, and 2 iron in terms of resources. Healing would also take 3 seconds for that unit. To train the same unit in the barracks, we would need 381 food, 79 wood, 32 stone, and 12 iron. The training time for this single unit would take me 1 minute and 20 seconds. Training and healing speeds vary per kingdom, but in my case, this all means that it takes roughly 10 times more resources and almost 27 times as much actual time to train a troop. These numbers suggest that we should value the killing of troops as roughly 15 to 20 times more valuable than wounded troops. In other words, one killed unit is equivalent to roughly 18 wounded troops in terms of value. If we look again at the report and keep this in mind, I can convert all these numbers in terms of wounded troops to more easily compare the actual damage done. On Med's side, we have 871,609 losses and 100,382 wounded. I'm going to convert Med's actual losses to their roughly equivalent wounded value by multiplying by 18. The final result is that Med suffered roughly 16 million wounded troops. On WNB's side, we have 259 losses with 375,771 wounded. Using that same multiplier for losses, we can see that WNB suffered approximately 380,000 wounded troops. The power loss difference between 71 million and 33 million in the report suggests that WMB took about half as many losses as Med, but when you look at the reality of losses and wounded and consider what it will take to get those troops back, there's really no comparison at all. When you look at Med's 16 million equivalent wounded and set it next to WMB's 380,000 equivalent wounded, there is a very clear winner in this battle, and it's not even close. This method of comparing losses doesn't consider the tiers of troops, of course, so it does have limitations. Still, it's a much more reliable judge of how the battle went than just looking at power loss. This first battle report was an example of one where we could already tell who won, but it may not have been immediately visible how lopsided the battle went. Let's look at one more quick example of a battle report that might confuse newer players. In this example, the WNB players had more than double the power loss than the Med player. You can also see that numerically the losses and wounded on the WNB side are much higher. A newer player would look at this report and make the assumption that 123 Radzio, the Med player, won this battle. However, it's not quite as simple as it appears. Remember that wounded and dead troops are not valued the same due to the difficulty in reacquiring those troops. If we value dead troops as roughly 18 times more wounded, WNB has an effective wounded of 197,000, while Med actually lost the equivalent of 1,118,149 wounded troops, which is more than 5 times as many. My goal in this video was to help you gain an understanding of how to determine the winner of a battle through the battle report. If this was helpful, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing for more content. See you next time. Thank you so much for watching this video and supporting the channel. If you liked what you saw, please consider hitting the like button and checking out other videos on the Miser's Guide to Evany. I'll see you in the next video.